Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like na 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 na. For my top 10, top 10, na 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 na. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because chances are you are the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Jeff Bezos, and my take on his top 50 rules for success. Enjoy.
For sure, we would be very naive to believe that we're not going to be criticized. I mean, that's just part of the terrain. You have to accept that. One thing I tell people is if you're going to do anything new or innovative, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. If you can't afford to be misunderstood, then for goodness sake, don't do anything new or innovative.
By the way, getting it wrong isn't that bad. That's the other thing. When we make mistakes, and we've made doozies like the Fire Phone and many other things that just didn't work out, we don't have enough time for me to list all of our failed experiments, but the big winners pay for thousands of failed experiments. So you try something like Prime, and it was very expensive at the beginning. It cost us a lot of money, because what happens when you offer a free all-you-can-eat buffet? Who shows up to the buffet first? The heavy eaters. It's scary. It's like, oh my God, did I really say as many prawns as you can eat? Oh. And so that is what happened. But surely we could see the trend lines. We could see that all kinds of customers were coming, and they appreciated that service. My grandparents would take me every summer, starting at age 4, every summer, kind of to give her a break, really, for the whole summer. So I'd be with my grandparents, and on their ranch in Cotulla, Texas, which is halfway between San Antonio and Laredo. We lived in Houston, and so we would make the 5-hour drive out to Cotulla. They'd drop me off, spend a couple of days there, then they'd go back to Houston. I'd spend the summer. And I went every day to the ranch with my grandfather to help. Now, a 4-year-old boy on a ranch in South Texas is not a lot of help. But I didn't know that. I thought I was helping, and then by the time I was 16, I actually was helping. So I have, I can suture up a prolapsed cow. I can fix windmills. My grandfather was so resourceful, and that he made his own veterinary needles. He would take a little piece of wire and pound it flat with like a oxyacetylene torch, and then drill a little hole through it. And then we did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived. And so we had great fun out there. We built barns and welded things, and he bought a D6 Caterpillar bulldozer used. It was like 1955 model year for $5,000. It was completely broken. The gears were stripped. And then we spent, a whole summer repairing that. And the first thing we had to do to repair it was build a crane to take the gears out of the transmission. And so, what I learned from watching him was just how resourceful he was. He didn't ever call a repairman. He figured it out.
One of the reasons we have been able to extend into new business areas, and first new product categories, going way back, we just sold books, and then we started selling music and DVDs and electronics and toys and so on. And then we've extended into electronic reading with Kindle. The reason customers have been receptive, in large part, to our new initiatives is because we have worked hard to earn trust with them. Earning trust with customers is a valuable business asset. And if you mistreat their data, they will know. They will figure it out. Customers are very smart. You should never underestimate customers.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for the habit to stick. That's what I want for you. So I've designed a custom free program where I'm going to send you an unlisted video for the next 254 days to shift your confidence and belief forward. The link to join is in the description below.
If everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do.
The stress primarily comes from not taking action. For me, I've seen small things get big, and it's part of this day one mentality. I like treating things as if they're small.
Your stock at one point, I think, went to $100, but then it went down to $6 or something like that.
At the peak of the internet bubble, our stock peaked somewhere around $113.
Okay.
And then after the internet bubble busted open, our stock went down to $6. It went from 113 to 6 in less than a year. My annual shareholder that year starts with a one-word sentence, and that one-word sentence is the word ouch.
So most of those internet companies of the dot-com era are out of business.
Yeah.
You survived. What was it that made you to survive, and virtually the rest of them are gone?
That whole period is very interesting because the stock is not the company, and the company is not the stock. And so as I watched the stock fall from 113 to 6, I was also watching all of our internal business metrics, number of customers, profit per unit, everything you can imagine, defects, etc. Every single thing about the business was getting better and fast. And so as the stock price was going the wrong way, everything inside the company was going the right way. And we didn't need to go back to the capital markets. We didn't need more money. The only reason, a financial bust like the internet bubble bursting is, makes it really hard to raise money. But, we already had the money we needed. So we just needed to continue to progress.
You don't choose your passions choose you. And I would always advise young people, actually anyone, to get in touch with what you're really passionate about. And it's a gift to have a passion. Some people are lucky they have more than one passion. They have 2 or 3. And that gives you energy. You can't force a passion on yourself. It just doesn't work. You can try, but it's unlikely to succeed. This work-life harmony thing is what I try to teach young employees, actually, and senior executives at Amazon too, but especially the people come in. We're asked about work-life balance all the time. And my view is that's a debilitating phrase because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And the reality is if I'm happy at home, I come into the office with tremendous energy. And if I'm happy at work, I come home with tremendous energy. And so it actually is a circle. It's not a balance. And I think that is worth everybody paying attention to. You never want to be that guy, and we all have a coworker who is that person who, as soon as they come into the meeting, they drain all of the energy out of the room. You can just feel the energy level go, whoosh. You don't want to be that guy. So you want to come into the office and give everybody a kick in their step. One of the precursors, one of the foundational things to being able to take risk is to have had some kind of support from somebody. You have to have some mentors. You have to have somebody who loves you. These are the kind of things that build up and allow you to kind of, jump off into uncharted terrain and do something new because you have a support system of one kind or another. And I certainly did. So for me, I just want to point out that I feel very strongly that I've won a lot of lotteries. Amazon is one of the lotteries that I've won, but I had a big lottery with my parents. My dad is a Cuban immigrant. He came here when he was 16 years old, didn't speak any English. He's a great guy. And my mother had me when she was 17 years old. So she was a pregnant 16-year-old in Albuquerque, New Mexico in high school, which was not cool. And she made it work, and her parents, my grandparents, helped her with that whole thing and made that all work. And if you don't get that kind of support somehow, it doesn't have to be your parents. Sometimes people get lucky, it's a grandparent, or it's a friend, or a family friend, or a teacher. It can be somebody, but you need that. Somebody has to step into your life. And that's a lottery that I suspect a lot of people in this room have also won, just like me. I get up early. I go to bed early. I get up early. I like to putter in the mornings. I like to read the newspaper. I like to have coffee. I like to have breakfast with my kids before they go to school. So I have my kind of puttering time is very important to me. And so that's why I set my first meeting for 10 o'clock. I like to do my high IQ meetings before lunch. Like anything that's going to be really mentally challenging, that's a 10 o'clock meeting. And because by 5 p.m., I'm like,
I can't think about that today. Let's try this again tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so then on sleep, I get 8 hours of sleep. I prioritize it, unless I'm traveling in different time zones. Sometimes it's impossible, but I am very focused on it. And for me, I need 8 hours of sleep. I think better. I have more energy. My mood is better. All these things. I'm taking my Amazon lottery winnings and I'm converting them into reusable rocket vehicles so that we can lower the cost of access to space. Because right now the price of admission to do interesting things in space is just too high. If I look at what Amazon was able to do 20 years ago, we didn't have to build a transportation network. It already existed. That heavy lifting was in place. We didn't have to build a payment system. That heavy lifting had already been done. It was the credit card system. We didn't have to build, put a computer at every desk. That had already been done too, mostly for playing games, by the way, and so on. So all the pieces of heavy lifting were already in place 20 years ago. And that's why, with $1 million, I could start this company. Today, and then there are even better examples on the internet over the last 20 years. Facebook started in a dorm room. I guarantee you 2 kids cannot build a giant space company in their dorm room. It's impossible. But I want to create the heavy lifting infrastructure, kind of do the hard part, so that the future generation, 2 kids in a dorm room, will be able to create a giant space company. I always tell people, sometimes I get, we'll have a good quarterly conference call or something, and Wall Street will like our quarterly results, and people will stop me and say, congratulations on your quarter, and I say thank you. But what I'm really thinking is, that quarter was baked 3 years ago. Right now, I'm working on a quarter that's going to reveal itself in 2021 sometime. And that's what you need to be doing. You need to be out sort of, 2 or 3 years in advance. And and then why do I need to make 100 decisions a day? If I make like 3 good decisions a day, that's enough. And they should just be as high quality as I can make them.
Take pride in your choices, not your gifts. This is something that I think is super important for young people to understand, and for parents to preach to young people. It's really easy for a talented young person to take pride in their gifts. They can say, I'm really athletic, or I'm really smart, or I'm really good at math. And that's fine. You should celebrate your gifts. You should be happy, but you can't be proud of them because they're gifts after all. They were given to you. What you can be proud of is your choices. How did you decide to use your gifts? Did you study hard? Did you work hard? Did you practice? The people who really excel combine gifts and hard work. And the hard work part is a choice. You get to decide that. And that is something, when you're looking back on your life, you'll be very proud of.
There are a lot of things that are a waste of time. When you think about your life, I often tell people that I work with, if you can get, because people have very high standards for how they want their work life to be. And I said, look, if you can get your work life to be where you enjoy half of it, that is amazing. Because very few people ever achieve that. Because the truth is, everything comes with overhead. That's reality. Everything comes with pieces that you don't like. You could be a Supreme Court justice, and there's still going to be pieces of your job you don't like. You can be a university professor, and it's still going to be, you have to go to committee meetings, and you have to do things. Every job comes with pieces you don't like. And we need to say, that's part of it. And not resent those pieces, or try not to, but also try to minimize them. I tell senior executives, you should have the least stress. There's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. And I find people don't dislike hard work. What people dislike is being out of control.
Like they can't control their life. They can't control their environment. This happens to me when I get overscheduled. I hate being overscheduled. I want some time to be able to think and free myself. We all have the same amount of time in the world. Nobody has more time than anybody else. And when you become a very successful person, one of the things, you start to get overscheduled. You have this event. You had to agree to do this, and maybe last night you were like, why did I agree to do this? I have to go on stage tomorrow. I wish I were really with my family. And, you know, or I hope maybe not this case. Let's say that you like this one. But in general, that kind of thing happens. And so you have to guard your time and try to stay a little bit flexible. So that's, for me, it's not a waste of time, but I like to have some freedom of movement rather than having every minute of every day scheduled.
When you buy over the internet, Amazon, do you ever get the wrong order? Is anything ever wrong? What do you do? Do you call up and complain, or you don't have any problems?
No,
with that?
I'm a customer of Amazon, hopefully like all of you in this room.
Is there one person full-time who services your account?
If there's anyone in this room who's not an Amazon customer, see me right afterwards and I'll walk you through it. It's, I have problems sometimes, and I treat them like the same way I treat a problem that I would get from a customer. My email address is famous, and I keep it, and I read it. It's jeff@amazon.com. I don't see every email that I get anymore because I get too many, but I see a lot of them. And I use my curiosity to pick out certain emails. So I'll get one from a customer, and there's a defect. You know, we've done something wrong. Usually people are writing us, not always, but usually they're writing us because we've screwed up their order somehow. And so I'm looking at this, and for some reason, something seems a little odd about that one. And so I'll ask the team to do a case study and find real root cause, or causes, it's usually causes, real root causes, and then real root fixes. So that when you fix it, you're not fixing it for that one customer, you're fixing it for every customer. And that process is a gigantic part of what we do. So I would treat if I have a failed order or some bad customer experience, I would treat it just like that. When I started Amazon, it was 25 years ago. I started Amazon in 1994. When I went to seek investors, the first question I had to answer is, what is the internet? None of my investors had ever heard of the internet. And the idea that I had in mind was to build a bookstore. I realized that we could build a store which would have every book ever printed in any language, in print or out of print. And we could do that online. It would be impossible in a physical store. And that was the founding idea of Amazon. But did I expect what would happen today? No. You know, we started, I've been at Amazon when it was one person, me, when it was 10 people, when it was 100 people, when it was 1,000 people. And today, when it's more than 700,000 people and approaching 70,000 people just here in India. So, no, I did not predict that. And actually, I think if anybody had predicted that, they would have needed to be immediately institutionalized in a mental facility because it's not a normal thing to have happen. My dream when I started Amazon was that one day we might be able to afford a forklift. So it's been a very fun journey for me. And by the way, I still tap dance into work. I'm having so much fun.
Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and this is the one that often catches people a little by surprise, because one of our leadership principles is that good leaders are right a lot. And it sounds kind of like, well, great, but is there some way that I can practice being right a lot? And you're not going to be right all the time, but I do think with practice, you can be right more often. And I've observed people who are right a lot, and I notice a few things about them. The first is that people who are right a lot, they listen a lot. And people who are right a lot change their mind a lot. And people who are right a lot, they seek to disconfirm their most profoundly held convictions, which is very unnatural for humans. So humans mostly, as we go about life, we're very selective in the evidence that we let seep into us. And we like to observe the evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And people who are right a lot work very hard to do that unnatural thing of trying to disconfirm their beliefs. I was living and working in New York City in 1994. I came across the fact that the World Wide Web was growing very quickly. It was tiny, but it was growing very fast. Most people had not heard of it. And I came up with this idea. The idea initially was very simple. It was to sell books online. And I went to my boss, who I liked a lot. His name was David. And I said, I have this idea to start this company to sell books on the internet. And he took me on a long walk in Central Park in New York and listened to this idea in great detail. And he said, it actually sounds like a really good idea to me, but I think it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And I thought about that. That made a certain amount of sense to me. And he said, why don't you think about it for 2 days before you make a final decision? And so I went away and I thought about this. And I was trying to figure out how to make this decision, because in the moment, personal life decisions, those choices can be very challenging. And I finally figured out for me the right way to think about it, which was I wanted not to have regrets. I pictured myself, 80 years old, and thinking back on my life in a quiet moment of reflection. Would I regret leaving this company in the middle of the year and walking away from my annual bonus and all those things that in the moment can be very confusing? And I thought, when I'm 80, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not even going to remember it. But what I will do, I know for a fact, I have this idea, and if I don't try, I'm going to regret having never tried. And I know also, if I try and fail, I'll never regret having tried and failed. And as soon as I thought about it that way, I knew I had to give it a try.
We're very interested in physical stores, and I've been asked for years, we ever open physical stores? Literally 20 years I've been asked the question, and I always say yes, but only when we have a differentiated offering, something that's not me too. Because that space, physical stores, is so well served. If we offer a Me Too product offering, it's not going to work. And it's also we're not very good at that. Whenever we've tried dabbling in something that's a Me Too service, we tend to get beaten. It doesn't work. Our culture is much better at pioneering and inventing, and so we have to have something that's different. And that's what Amazon Go is. It's completely different. The Amazon bookstore, completely different. And we have ideas about how to merge Prime and Whole Foods to make that. Those are still rolling out. You haven't seen them yet. But to use Amazon Prime to make Whole Foods a very differentiated experience. And so what we're going to be able to do is take some of our resources, some of our technological know-how, and expand the Whole Foods mission. They have a great mission, which is to bring nourishing food to everybody, organic, nourishing food to everybody. But we have a lot to bring to that table in terms of resources, but also in terms of operational excellence and in terms of technology know-how.
I think this is a golden age of television. So when you look at, TV series today, the really good TV series are, in terms of quality, they're as good as the very best movies have ever been. And you're getting the best storytellers to come do television. You're getting the best actors to now come do television. One of the great storytellers is right here. Thank you for the help.
Thank you.
And this is a big deal when you can get the very best people, because this is one of those businesses where the viewer is always looking for something a little fresh. And so you can never find a formula, because as soon as you find a formula, it's not fresh anymore. They're always looking for something a little new. So it really takes human ingenuity. It takes people. The storytellers have to be in touch with the zeitgeist. And what I want Amazon Studios to be all over the world, I want us to be known as the most talent-friendly studio in the world. And the reason you need to do that, thank you, is because at the end of the day, it is the talent that makes those stories. Storytelling is the oldest thing that humans do. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. Long before there was written language, before there was any medium to convey it, people sat around and they told each other stories. And it's how we teach each other things. And we learn from stories. We learn from fiction. We learn from fiction because we get to live an alternate life. In that moment, you watch this and you're learning it. So it can be fun, it can be action, it can be funny, it can be comedy, but the very best things take those elements and teach a little something. There's something in there that you walk away with and you're inspired by it. And it doesn't matter if it's drama, comedy, anything, you're gonna walk away with something. And there needs to be lightness. You know, you can't watch something that's just all heavy and you're like, oh my God, you know, I want to kill myself now. There also has to be that gesture. There has to be somebody who brings you out and lets you breathe a little bit. So this is so hard to do. That's why there is so many bad movies and so many bad TV shows, because it is one of the hardest things that humans do, is tell riveting, engaging, inspiring stories. But when you get it right, it's a lever that can change the world. I've been following this Ice Bucket Challenge, and I find it totally amazing. It's really for a great cause, ALS, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. I read that this challenge has now raised over $4.4 million. And the creators of it are really ingenious, and they deserve a lot of credit. So anyway, I decided, yeah, of course I'm gonna accept Satya's challenge. But then the question is, who am I gonna challenge? It's a very important question and not one to be taken lightly. So I started asking friends, colleagues, anybody I ran into for suggestions yesterday. And I started to get a lot of really good suggestions. In fact, one of the first suggestions I thought, okay, we are done. This is it. It does not get better than this. Go ahead, put up there. Obviously, Edward Snowden. It's so obvious. But then I started thinking, but wait, you know, if he takes the Ice Bucket Challenge, it'll just leak. So we had to keep thinking. We went back to the drawing board, and I was talking to people, and they said, anybody, you got to think bigger. Got to think bigger, Jeff. And I said, all right, well, what do you have in mind? And they suggested what also I think, in retrospect, kind of obvious: the Queen and the Pope. So I got pretty excited about that. And but then I thought, this will never work. These people wear hats. So I had to give up on that idea as much as I loved it. And we kept brainstorming. And then finally somebody suggested what I thought would be a surefire winner. Go ahead, bring him up on the screen. Kim Jong-un. I mean, really, that would be incredible. It combines everything one might hope for in somebody to challenge for the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. And so I was very excited about this. But then, unfortunately, somebody pointed out it would actually be very difficult to even get the message to him because he's just not big on Twitter or Facebook. He's just doesn't really like it. So anyway, at the end of the day, I decided I would just go super personal, go way back into the past to some true childhood heroes in a real passion of mine space. And I am going to challenge, go ahead, William Shatner and Patrick Stewart and George Takei. Guys, you have 24 hours to accept the Ice Bucket Challenge. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Be stubborn on vision and flexible on details. You really can't accomplish anything important if you're not stubborn on vision, because things that are important take a long time. They take teams. You can't do it by yourself, and so you really need to have a crisp idea of the vision. You need to stay incredibly relentless on that vision, but you need to be flexible on the details, because you've got to be experimental to accomplish anything important, and that means you're going to be wrong a lot, and so you're going to try something on your way to that vision, and that's going to be the wrong thing, the wrong decision. You're going to have to back up, take a little course correction, and try again. And so you cannot be stubborn on the details. You have to be flexible on the details. A young person starting their career, I think there are probably a lot of things. Some of them are very well known and people have heard them many times. They're still true. One of those is you should always focus on, a young person should find something that they're passionate about to do. And that's not going to surprise anyone. It's a clear thing to do. It's very hard. If you don't love your work, you're never going to be great at it. I think the other thing I would suggest to any young person, even before they start their career, is to really think about their choices. Because I find young people, and when I was young, I made this mistake too. You can get very fixed on your gifts. So everybody has gifts. You know, you have gifts and you have things that you didn't get gifted. Maybe you're extremely beautiful. Maybe you're extremely good at mathematics. There are a lot of things that you can be given. But those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices that construct your life, not your gifts. You can celebrate your gifts. Be proud of them. Be happy of them. Actually, don't be proud of them. Be celebratory of them, but you can't be proud because they're gifts. They were given to you. You didn't earn them. You can only be proud of the things you earn. And so as I got older, I started to realize I wasn't proud of my gifts. I was always good at school. School was always easy for me. And I was always proud that I was a great student. I got A's in all my classes. I was good at math, all of that. And I thought that's who I was. But it's not true. Those are the things that are gifts. What was hard for me is deciding to work hard, deciding to use my gifts in certain ways, to challenge myself, to do things that I didn't think I could do, to put myself in uncomfortable situations. We all I would say to a young person, you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. Which one of those, when you're 90 years old, are you going to be more proud of?
Look, we would all love all of our numbers to be smooth lines up and to the right, and that would be terrific. But that's not how it works. Those numbers are output measures, and I guess you could try to manage your quarterly earnings very precisely, but I think personally that would be a mistake. Most of the work that we put into any particular quarter happened years ago. So it's not, there aren't that many knobs you can turn during a quarter. I mean, you can, but they're like eating your seed corn if you turn those knobs. You don't want to do that. And so people, I think if you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results. So the Benjamin Graham quote here is that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. And I think people are well advised to build a company that wants to be weighed and not voted upon. And that means having good return on invested capital and having lots of free cash flow. But if you said to me, if I said, here's a job I would reject. If somebody came up to me and said, Jeff, I want your job to be to drive up the Amazon stock price and just manage that directly. Now, this might sound ridiculous to some of you, but many companies actually do this. They actually go out and they try to sell the stock. That's kind of the final output. And it's much better to say, okay, let's not do that. That's not going to be sustainable. It's kind of a silly approach. What are the inputs to a higher stock price? And you say, okay, well, free cash flow and return on invested capital are inputs to a higher stock price. Okay,
So let's keep working backwards. What are the inputs to free cash flow? And you keep working backwards until you get to something that's controllable. And a controllable input for free cash flow would be something like lower cost structure. And then you back up from there and you say, okay, well, if we can improve our picking efficiency in our fulfillment centers and reduce defects are very, very costly. It's probably, reducing defects at the root is one of the best ways to lower cost structure. And so then that starts to be a job you would accept. You would say, if you're a reasonable person, you would say, I have no idea how to drive up the stock price. I can't manage that directly. It's not a controllable input. But I can make your picking algorithms more efficient. And that will reduce cost structure and then, follow that chain all along the way. That's what you do in all of these businesses.
Failure and invention are inseparable twins. Everybody wants to be inventive. If you go talk to corporate America or any institution, actually, government agencies and so on, innovation is something to be proud of. People like invention. But the problem is they don't like failure. And you cannot have invention without failure. If you already know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. And only through experimentation can you get real invention. The most important inventions come from trial and error with lots of failure. And the failure is critical, and it's also embarrassing. And so that's why people, when we're kids, we always are doing trial and error, and we're never embarrassed. You watch a little toddler, and they will try for hours to put a square peg in a round hole, and it never works. But it doesn't keep them from trying. And they try things like that, and that's how they learn. And we all have that when we're little, and then as we get older, somehow it's not as cool as you get older to fail and to fall down. It looks clumsy. And so we get in our grooves, we have a set of expertise and skills, it's kind of a comfort zone, and you have to constantly push yourself to say, no, I don't care about failure. In fact, I say at Amazon, we have to grow the size of our failures as the size of our company grows. We have to make bigger and bigger failures, because otherwise none of our failures will be needle movers. And so I would see it as a very bad sign over the long run if Amazon wasn't making larger and larger failures. And if you do that all along the way, that is going to protect you from ever having to make that big, kind of Hail Mary bet that you sometimes see companies make right before they fail and go out of existence.
The most influential people in my life were my grandparents. And my mother had me when she was 17 years old. She raised me with my grandparents' help, and she was still in high school when she had me. That was not cool in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1964, but she did an incredible job. But I was lucky because I had not just her, but she married my father when I was about 4 years old. He has been a huge influence in my life, but my grandmother and grandfather were like second set of parents for me. And you learn different things from them because they're at a different stage of life and they know different things, they're calm about certain things. It was a huge gift to me. My grandfather had a ranch in Texas, and I spent all my summers there from like age 4 to 16, and he was the most self-reliant person. He did all of his own veterinary work, all the things, and to observe him solve problems and figure out how to do things with no tools and no resources and very small amounts of money. It was a huge education from an early age. So we were very lucky. One of the things that I know people who they don't have great family situations, and sometimes they break that cycle and they are the ones who pull out of it. Those people are the ones I reserve my highest admiration for. As the owner of the Post, I know that at times the Post is going to write stories that are going to make very powerful people very unhappy. And
are you upset if they are writing critical stories about Amazon, which they do?
No, I'm not upset at all. When I first bought the Post in 2013,
Did you ever interfere?
Never. I would be humiliated to interfere. I would be so embarrassed. I would turn bright red, and it has nothing to do with I don't even get so far, I just don't want to. For me, it would feel icky. It would feel gross. It would be one of those things when I'm 80 years old, I would be so unhappy with myself if I interfered. Why would I? Yeah. I want that paper to be independent. Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. You want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, the first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure out, that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say, I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will greenlight it. And I'm fine with that, because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work, right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. Now, and then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and using the judgment of the most senior people to me, this really helps.
Well, 2 pizza teams is something that we've been preaching at Amazon almost from the very beginning, and it's a simple idea, which is no team should be so large that it cannot be fed with just 2 pizzas. And so obviously to do great things you need big teams, but you need to subdivide them. And the reason that it's so helpful is because there's a we humans grew up around campfires and telling each other stories, and you're sitting at tables tonight that have about 10 people at each table. 10 people, maybe 12 people, is the perfect size to have a natural human coordination without a lot of structure. And if you want to have a big group of 100 people or 500 people organized, you have to have a lot of structure to make that work. And so if you can arrange to do big things with a multitude of small teams, and that takes a lot of effort to organize that way, but if you can figure that out, the communication on those small teams will be very natural and easy.
Warren Buffett has this great quote. He says, you can hold a rock concert, and that's okay, and you can hold a ballet, and that's okay. Just don't hold a rock concert and advertise it as a ballet. Investors come in all shapes and sizes. They have different investment horizons, different approaches, different beliefs about what the right kind of portfolio looks like. And so it's not one, people use Wall Street as a shorthand, but there isn't one type of investor. They come in all shapes and sizes. And you have to be super clear about what kind of company you're trying to build, what your approach is. We laid that out in our 1997 annual shareholder letter. We said we were going to take big bets. We said they were going to fail. We said some of them hopefully were going to work. We said we were going to invest for the long term, that we were going to try to take advantage of market opportunities as they arose. And there's a certain kind of investor who is aligned with that approach. And so, again, you can hold the ballet or the rock concert, and both can work. Just be clear about which one you are, and then people can self-select.
Zoya, would you cast him in a film?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I would.
And give him a speaking line?
I would have.
Yeah, it has to be pivotal.
Pivotal.
I don't want to end up on the cutting room floor.
Okay, would you audition for it?
What?
Would you audition for this role?
Yeah, of course. Of
course,
I'm coming there. Right now, ladies and gentlemen.
Wait,
Jeff
now?
Is now.
You want me to audition now?
Time, Jeff, time. We don't have time. We have to audition now.
Okay, now I'm intimidated.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all, okay. So the line is a film her brother directed, I acted in.
Okay.
And because you're so busy, and we're extremely thankful, all of us, including me and Zoya, everyone backstage for giving us your valuable time. It is impossible to get a gentleman like this, who's so inspiring, so wonderful, telling us such nice anecdotes from his life and talking about business and to young entrepreneurs and all the youngsters who are listening to this. Because his time is so precious, it's difficult to catch him. The line is in Hindi.
Oh, no.
Say after me.
In Hindi?
Yeah, this is the alien language you have to speak in.
All right.
And we'll put the universal thingy on you. So it is Jeff ko pakarna mushkil nahi. I have the same accent as him, huh? Mushkil nahi. Namumkin hai. Okay, make it universal. Ching, universal, impossible hai.
Impossible hai.
Absolutely, guys. Jeff Bezos.
When I'm 80, now 90, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have in my life. And most of our regrets are acts of omission. They're things we didn't try. It's the path untraveled. Those are the things that haunt us.
What do you say to employees when you obviously have some traders in the stock who are not happy and suddenly the stock is down 25% after a quarter?
Well, since 1997, at almost every all-hands meeting, we have 2 all-hands meetings a year. At almost every all-hands meeting, I remind employees that, if the stock is up 10% this month, don't feel 10% smarter, because when the stock is down 10% some month, you're going to have to feel 10% dumber, and it's not going to feel as good. And so it's, ownership is, we give most of our compensation is done in terms of stock compensation. And part and parcel with ownership is a mentality of long-term thinking. Owners think longer term than renters do. So I have a friend who rented his house to some tenants, and instead of getting a Christmas tree stand at Christmas, they just nailed the Christmas tree into the hardwood floors of the house. No owner would ever do that. And but sometimes that's a bad tenant. They're good tenants, but that's a bad tenant, and it's because this is the same old thing about nobody ever washed a rental car, and you take better care of the things that you own, but one of the responsibilities of ownership, and definitely deep inside the Amazon culture, is to think about the fundamentals of the business and not the daily fluctuations in the stock price. There's no information in it.
You shop on Amazon, and if you have something, the service you don't like.
Yeah.
So do you just pick up the phone, call your team of 700,000 people, and tell them, I don't like this, change this, or...
You know what I do? So I don't do this, it doesn't happen that often, but if I get a delivery that I don't like, maybe I don't like the way it's packaged or something, we have regular meetings of the senior executive team, and I bring the box to the meeting. And when I walk in, I haven't done this in a while, it's been a while, but when I bring in a box, everybody in the room is like, oh no, he's bringing in a box, because it's always some problem. But really the way I get feedback is primarily from my email address is very well known, and I keep it well known. And I get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day from customers, and they always have something interesting to say when something goes wrong, because we have hundreds of millions of customers around the world, and no matter how good we are, we can still be better. You can always be better. Customers have a divine discontent, and they teach you if you listen to customers. So we watch for that, and we see patterns, and we can find places where it's not working, something's going wrong, and that's really how I get the feedback, is from customer input. And often, in all caps, angry, you ruined my child's birthday because the gift didn't show up on time. And we take that, and
what you really want to do is you take that, it's an anecdote, it's a single example, but you need to find the root cause. What went wrong deep inside the system? How did this happen? Because then you can fix it for everyone, so that particular problem will never happen again. You don't just fix the symptom, you have to fix the root cause. And that's been the secret to our operational success for 20 years. What I want to achieve with Blue Origin is to build the heavy lifting infrastructure that allows for the kind of dynamic entrepreneurial explosion of thousands of companies in space that I have witnessed over the last 21 years on the internet. So when I think about the founding of Amazon.com, it only could work, so it take you back to 1995, July 1995, we open our doors. And this is a 10-person company. I'm driving the packages to the post office myself. And we were sitting on a bunch of heavy lifting infrastructure. Otherwise, a tiny company could never have started Amazon.com. You couldn't do it. For example, there was already a gigantic logistics network called the US Postal Service and UPS and FedEx. That would have been tens of billions, actually hundreds of billions of dollars of capital that you would have had to have laid out if you had to build a logistics network. We didn't have to do that. It existed. That heavy lifting was already done. The internet itself was sitting on top of, at that time, the long-distance phone network. Again, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of capital put in place for long-distance phone calls, but repurposed for the internet. Payment system. There was already a payment system. We didn't have to do that. It was called the credit card, and it had been initially put in place for travelers, and so on and so on. And you can go through, and what we were able to do is take all of that heavy lifting infrastructure and kind of reassemble it in a new way and do something new and inventive with it. And that's one lens through which you can view the founding of Amazon.com. In space today, that is impossible. On the internet today, you know, two kids in their dorm room can reinvent an industry. That's because the heavy lifting infrastructure is in place for that. Today, two kids in their dorm room can't do anything interesting in space. You know, you could build a CubeSat. There's not that much interesting about CubeSats. And that may change, but right now, there's just, there are certain laws of physics and certain things you need size for, and things need to be big. We need to be able to put big things in space at low cost. And so, if I'm 80 years old and I can say to myself that Blue Origin did the heavy lifting, you know, I'm using my Amazon winnings to do a new piece of heavy lifting infrastructure, which is low cost access to space. Vehicles have to be reusable. You can't throw them away. Throw away space vehicles every time, you're never going to lower the cost. So we're trying to lower the price of admission into space so that thousands of entrepreneurs can then do amazing, surprising things. Nobody in 1995,
so it's not that much, just
nobody in 95 predicted
travel.
Snapchat. Right. You know, it's I can't predict for you what amazing entrepreneurs, brilliant, amazing entrepreneurs will do in space. But I know if I give them low-cost access to space, some brilliant, 22-year-old is going to figure it out.
It's one of those things about what companies get sustainable. It's those that provide platforms upon which others can build. Amazon does it,
empower others, empower others to do things. So AWS is like that. Kindle Direct Publishing is like that. Our third-party selling business is like that. Fulfillment by Amazon is like that. Every time you figure out some way of providing tools and services that empower other people to deploy their creativity, you're really onto something. My opinion is that I can do some things that Amazon would be hard for other people to do only because of my history with the company. And as the company has grown, of course, my job has changed very much. And it has, my main job today is I'm kind of I work hard at helping to maintain the culture. A culture of high standards, of operational excellence, of inventiveness, of willingness to fail, willingness to make bold experiments. I'm the counterbalance to the institutional no who can say yes. But I won't, I'm not going to be here forever. Amazon is a really many of the traits that make Amazon unusual are now deeply ingrained in the culture. In fact, if I wanted to change them, I couldn't. If I decided tomorrow that I wish Amazon did less pioneering and more close following, I couldn't do it. The culture cultures are self-reinforcing, and that's a good thing. The people who come to the company, we get sometimes people come to the company and they find Amazon very boring because we don't have enough, competitive zeal. We don't wake up. Some annual planning processes and some companies literally start with who are our 3 biggest enemies, and then here's how we're going to hold them at bay or defeat them. And we don't have such a list at Amazon. It's not how our annual planning process works. And so, but if you're, on the other hand, if you're the kind of person who gets up in the morning and says, in the shower time, what can we invent for customers and what can we do differently and how can we improve that experience and so on, then it's going to be a playground. I still run into work, by the way. I took my family on vacation to France, my wife's extended family. There were about 20 of us. And we had an unbelievably good time, great food, everything. We were there for a week. I got back to Seattle and I ran into the office. I'm having so much fun.
As number one on the list, we were talking to Steve Case yesterday, and he had been number one, and a couple of years later, he was not on the list.
Well, you're making me really nervous.
No, don't be nervous. Just tell me what could happen that would do that to you and Amazon, and how do you prevent that? Do you worry it could all come unraveled?
Well, I kind of have this experience kind of already happened to me because you put me on the cover of Time Magazine as Person of the Year in 1999, and about a year later, the internet bubble burst. I think Amazon's stock went from $113 a share to $6 or something like that. So these things happen. The thing for companies is you need to be nimble and robust. So you need to be able to take a punch, and you also need to be quick and innovative and doing new things at a high speed. That's the best defense against the future. And you have to always be leaning into the future. If you're leaning away from the future is going to win every time. Never, ever, ever lean away from the future. To be innovative, you have to experiment. If you want to have more invention, you need to do more experiments per week, per month, per year, per decade. It's that simple. You cannot invent without experimenting. And here's the other thing about experiments. Lots of them fail. If you know it's going to work in advance, it is not an experiment. And what happens in big organizations, Amazon's a big organization now too, the Air Force is a big organization, is that we start to confuse experimentation with operational excellence. So operational excellence is one of our 4 key principles at Amazon. We're building a fulfillment center. We've built over 150 large fulfillment centers around the world now. We know how to do that. That is not an experiment. If we build the 151st fulfillment center and screw it up, that's just a failure. That's not the kind of failure we're seeking. We want failures where we're trying to do something new, untested, never proven. That's a real experiment, and they come in all scale sizes.
There's your completely massive and globally dominant commerce business, first party and third party. There is AWS, Amazon Web Services, which came out of nowhere and is now massive. You're in the hardware business, including Echo and Kindle and the phone, grocery delivery, payments, TV shows. You're now making TV shows, advertising. Jeff, how can you possibly do all of that?
Exhausting me.
How can you possibly do all of that and do it okay? Even okay, let alone good.
So I think one way to think about this is, what are you really focusing on? So, I'm focusing on those things that I think make Amazon unusual. Genuine customer obsession. So like every single thing you just mentioned, when our senior executives sit down and review those programs, they're looking for customer obsession.
The question was, why did we expand into things like electronics, tools, and kitchen, since those businesses are not today profitable?
And the answer is that, that it increases our addressable market size, so we can ultimately build a much larger company by entering into those new product categories. And second, while it's true that those new categories, which are only 3 years old, and by the way, electronics, tools, and kitchen is now a $600 million business at Amazon.com, which makes it one of the largest, on a standalone basis, it's probably in the top 4 or 5 e-commerce companies anywhere in the world. So that business is growing and growing very rapidly. And it has one of the big advantages it has a huge audience of early adopters, which is why companies like Segway choose us as the exclusive launch platform for products like that, because really early adopters are the kind of people who buy stuff like this. So it's, but that business ultimately will be, electronics in particular, in my opinion, will be our largest, most profitable business one day. When you start a new business, there are certain fixed costs that come along with starting that business. And then the business has to reach enough scale so that the profit from the business, the variable profit, can cover those fixed costs. There's no sidestepping that, and it's just a simple investment issue.
Solve that Rubik's Cube? Yeah. No, thank you. I can't even do that with my hands.
One of the unusual things that we do in the Kindle device business is we sell our hardware near break even. And so we make money when people use the device, not when they buy the device. And that is very aligning with customers. If I buy a device and I put it in my desk drawer and never use it, then Amazon doesn't deserve to make any money. Likewise, it causes us to have the right kinds of behaviors. So for example, if we're not making money when people buy the device, then we don't need people to be on the upgrade treadmill. We have people who are still using 5-year-old Kindle Ones, and we're perfectly happy about that. AWS is very similar because it's a pay-as-you-go service. We are not incented to get people to overbuy hardware, to operate at low utilization rates. Our point of view on this is if we can arrange things in such a way that our interests are aligned with our customers, then in the long term, that will work out really well for customers and it'll work out really well for Amazon. My view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading. I like the phrase work-life harmony because I know that if I am energized at work, happy at work, feeling like I'm adding value, part of a team, whatever energizes you, that makes me better at home. It makes me a better husband, a better father, and likewise, if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss, all the things. It's not primarily about, there may be crunch periods where it's about the number of hours in the week, but that's not the real thing. Usually it's about, do you have energy? And is your work depriving you of energy, or is your work generating energy for you? And you know, there are people, everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people just They drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're going to be. Are you going to add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle, it's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, that maybe there are limits, and they probably. But I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy, and that's what I would recommend. And that's what I do recommend to interns and execs. Why not stick to the knitting? So, and my point of view on sticking to the knitting is that it's not the right thing for most businesses to be that focused. It's true that you hone skills in a business. You learn to be really good at a few things, and you do want to extend out from those skills. But your customer needs change slowly over time, and you have to learn new skills on behalf of your customers. So basically, we had a bunch of readers as customers, people who love to read. And they didn't know it, our customers, they weren't asking directly, but basically they were saying to us, you're going to have to learn a new skill. You're going to have to stretch and learn how to manufacture hardware so that you can continue to serve me 10 years from now. That's what our customers were telling us. And that's good. If businesses, try new things and stretch their muscles and put themselves in uncomfortable situations, I think one of the reasons that businesses stick to the knitting is because it's way more comfortable.
There are a couple of other things that are essential for innovation and invention that are not as fun. One of them is you have to have a willingness to fail. You have to have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. If you do something in a new way, and I don't care what it is, people are initially going to misunderstand it relative to the traditional way. And there'll be well-meaning critics who, genuinely want the best outcome, but they're worried about this new way. And there'll also be, of course, self-interested critics who have a vested interest in the traditional, they have some profit stream tied to the traditional way. But doing things, if you never want to be criticized, for goodness sake, don't do anything new. So it's okay though, if you have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time, if you have a willingness to fail, then what you can do is you can ramp up your rate of experimentation. So successful invention is inventions that customers care about. It's actually relatively easy to invent new things that customers don't care about. But successful invention, if you want to do a lot of that, you basically have to increase your rate of experimentation. And that you can think of as a process. How do you go about organizing your systems, your people, all of your assets, your own daily life and how you spend time? How do you organize those things to increase your rate of experimentation? Because not all of your experiments are going to work. You need people who, and this is very tricky, you need people who are experts in a certain domain area, because the world is so complex today, it's really hard to invent something if you're not an expert, if you don't have the underlying tools at your disposal and know what's going on. You can't invent something in neurosurgery without knowing something about neurosurgery. It's just going to be very difficult because we're very advanced. And that's true in every field of endeavor. But to really be an inventor, you have to combine that expertise with the beginner's mind. You have to have a certain childlike ability to not be trapped by your expertise. And that fresh look, that beginner's mind, once you're an expert, is unbelievably hard to maintain. But great inventors are always looking. They have a certain divine discontent, and they may have seen something 1,000 times, and still it occurs to them that thing, even though they're accustomed to it, could be improved.
And that's, you have to look for people like that. And I also think cultures support that. You can't, even if you're that kind of person, if you're in a culture that doesn't support failure, willingness to fail is critical for invention, willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. Most inventions don't really work that well in the beginning. They're clumsy, they're little toddlers, they're always falling and tripping. And so you have to have a culture in your organization that supports this kind of stumbling and wandering. Just because you're wandering doesn't mean you're lost. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're trying to invent. I think it's the very rare idea that can be done by a single individual. Almost everything that is going to change the world, solve a problem, improve something, these are usually big efforts, and they require a team working together to really get something important done. And that has been the story of Amazon.com. At every step along the way, we've had a team here that is making this work. I mean, I don't know, even at the smallest scale, you have to figure out how to get help from your friends, from your family members, from people that you can hire in those early days. I think without that, it would never work. From the very beginning, in 1994, when I came across this fact that the web was growing at 2,300% a year, I was working on Wall Street, a very specialized kind of investment bank called a quantitative hedge fund, a company called D.E. Shaw. And when I decided I was going to go do this crazy thing, I went and told my boss, and he said, well, let's go for a walk. So we went on a 2-hour walk in Central Park, and he actually thought it was a good idea. He's a very smart guy. His name's David Shaw. He's one of the few people I know who has a fully developed left brain, a fully developed right brain, just a super smart guy. And he said, this is a great idea, but it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. That was actually a compelling argument to me. And so I went away. He convinced me to think about it for 2 more days. And it was very hard to make that decision. And until I found the right framework in which to make the decision. And I think because I know there are a lot of people who are interested in entrepreneurial activities out there, I think this could be useful. It's the right framework for me anyway to make the kind of decision was a regret minimization framework. So I projected myself into the future, and I'm 80 years old, and I'm looking back on my life. What do I want to have done at that point? I want to have minimized all the regrets that I have. And I knew that when I was 80, there was no chance that I would regret having walked away from my 1994 Wall Street bonus or any of that kind of thing. I wouldn't even remember that. But I did think there was a chance that I might regret not having participated somehow in this thing that I thought was going to be very exciting called the internet. And I also knew that if I tried and failed, I wouldn't regret that. So once I thought about it that way, it became incredibly easy to make that decision. I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is an interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two. Because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time. And so as you pointed out, in our retail business, we know that customers want low prices. And I know that's going to be true 10 years from now. They want fast delivery. They want vast selection. It's impossible to imagine a future 10 years from now where a customer comes up to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish the prices were a little higher. You know how I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Impossible. And so the effort that we put into those things, spinning those things up, we know the energy we put into it today will still be paying dividends for our customers 10 years from now. And so when you have something that you know is true, even over the long term, you can afford to put a lot of energy into it. On AWS, the big ideas are also pretty straightforward. It's impossible for me to imagine that 10 years from now, somebody is going to say, I love AWS, I just wish it were a little less reliable. Or I love AWS, I just wish you would raise prices. It should be a little more expensive. Or I love AWS, and I wish you would innovate and improve the APIs at a slightly slower rate. None of those things you can imagine. And so the big ideas in business are often very obvious, but it's very hard to maintain a firm grasp of the obvious at all times. But if you can do that and continue to spin up those flywheels and put energy into those things, as we're doing with AWS, over time, you build a better and better service for your customers on the things that genuinely matter to them. As soon as you're doing something new, it's like being a toddler all over again. You get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down. And so businesses need to do that same thing. They need to remember that it's not that bad to fall down. And it doesn't hurt that much. When we try things like Amazon Web Services, we didn't know that was going to work. It has worked really well, but it's the kind of thing that if it hadn't worked, I always tell people, well, guess what? If something doesn't work, the day we stop doing it, all that will happen is our operating margins will improve. It won't be that bad. And companies get afraid. I think most companies get criticized for experiments that they tried that failed. But really, companies should be criticized for the omissions, the things they should have tried and didn't. And those almost always go unremarked. One of the first times that I demoed recommendations live with a live website, I was speaking to a group of Wall Street analysts, and my number one personal recommendation was the DVD called Slave Girls Beyond Infinity. And this is much less embarrassing, and you never know what you're going to get. I never know exactly what I'm going to get because it is live and it does change, from minute to minute. But I'm glad to see that today I've gotten, Apollo. And then I can see, of course, why was I recommended this? Because I bought Cosmos and Angle of Attack and another book called Apollo. But Slave Girls Beyond Infinity, I'll just show you, was a little embarrassing. What happened to that laser pointer thing? Oh, here it is. Do not look directly into me. Okay. There it is. Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity. Let's go over here. This is pretty interesting. So you can buy this DVD with Assault of the Killer Bimbos. Buy together. It's only $19.96. All of that product clustering is done automatically, of course. You come down and you'll notice that customers who bought Slave Girls also bought Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, and my personal favorite, Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And there's this interesting thing here. We even know when things are part of a series. So we say, and also they bought DVDs from the Barbarian Queen series, so we can click through and look at the Barbarian Queen. And there's a customer review here. It says, for Lena Clarkson fans only. This is Barbarian Queen 2. This is not even Barbarian Queen. It's an incredibly bad film whose only redeeming feature is Lena Clarkson in and out of some skimpy outfits. She's completely gorgeous, but even she can't save a disaster of a film. Then here comes the great recommendation. Buy Deathstalker instead.
Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of following through on your goals. 35%! That's not enough. That's not enough just to get motivated. Believe Nation, we're here. You're here. Today matters. You're an action taker. When you commit to a plan of action of when and how you're going to follow through, when you write it down, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you commit publicly to somebody else, it jumps to 95% chance. From 30-something% to 95% chance of you following through. Believe Nation, we need to make this happen. So question of the day, your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action specific for the next week. Put it down in the comments below, and I'm going to show on screen sometime next week to celebrate you.
The best advice I can give somebody is do something that you think is interesting and let the waves catch you. You know, something that I see people do, which I don't think is a good idea, is they try to chase the current thing. I saw this so much in 1997 and 1998, 1999 with respect to the internet. There were, you know, in 94 and 95 and 96 and 97, mostly the people who were, you know, the kind of the earlier you get, the more true this is, but, you know, the people who were sort of looking at this space and starting companies were genuinely interested in it. They thought it was really cool. By the time you got to 1999, like doctors were stopping, you know, like, screw that doctor thing. I'm going to start a .com company, you know, and so that really made no sense whatsoever. You know, people were sort of abandoning the things they were genuinely interested in, trying to catch a wave. And whenever you try to catch a wave, you're almost always too late. So it's better to just, I mean, if you're paddling after it, you basically have to wait in place and let it come to you.
If you want to see the top 50 I did on Elon Musk, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
2008 in particular was awful because we had the third launch failure in a row of our Falcon 1 vehicle at SpaceX.